The like celebration thing going on. We are live. It is 7:28. A little bit late. I was having some difficulty with my computer. I think some stuff is going on. I'm gonna do something about it. So hopefully I got it working, and hopefully everybody can hear me and all that. So sign in or shout out. Let me know that you guys can hear okay, that everything's going okay. Today I put up a video on the 400 Ford versus the 400 in Chevy. As we talked about earlier today, obviously there are lots of comments about people, Chevy's better, Ford's better, blah, 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 all that stuff. Really what you see more is, hey, here are some slightly different combinations. And that's really what the discussion should be about, in my mind, is I ran a few different combinations of each one, particularly different. We ran different intake manifolds and different camshafts, and then we ran boosted and non-boosted and that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of good things to choose from there. So you could pick, hey, look, particularly do you like this cam that makes more peak power? Do you like this cam that makes more low speed power? In one instance, they made for about 1,000 or 1,500 RPM. They made the same power in the middle part, exactly the same. There's overlays, but one of them a lot better down low, one of them a lot better up top. And here's the thing that normally happens when we see this. We see this with intake manifolds sometimes too, but certainly with camshafts, it might pick up, let's say 15 or 20 at the top, but usually it loses more than that down low. So you get 30 foot-pounds down low and you get a gain of 15 or 20 at the top. So from a numerical standpoint, do you think that that's equivalent? Do you think it's more important to have, torque? Would you trade an equal amount of torque, like 15 foot-pounds, for an equal amount of horsepower, 15 horsepower, if they happened over the same RPM spread, like let's say 1,000 horsepower, 1,500 RPM, let's say 1,000 horsepower, 1,000 RPM or 1,500 RPM, on either side of where they were doing about the same thing? Which one of those would you take? Would you be more apt to do that? We see a similar thing with intake manifolds with single planes and dual planes. On one of the cam tests that we did, we put in a pretty good size. I think they were the bullet cams. And so with the camshaft that had the right kind of valve events, and guys can argue about the tight LSA and all that stuff. But when you put a camshaft in, you can do that depending on what you're comparing it to. In that instance, we didn't see a big change in low speed power. I didn't run it down at 2,000 RPM where we probably would see a difference, but we saw just mostly gains. And so when you see something like that, that's just a win. I mean, if you have the same and then you got more, that's just more. That's just like a better deal. The other thing is, and the thing that we kind of want to talk about tonight is, we had run the small block Chevy, the 400-inch small block Chevy. We had run that previously with, I think it was an 871 blower, and then also with a VORTECH. And we had run more boost on the VORTECH and ultimately made more power. But if we were to run, the question for tonight is, at least the thumbnail or the poll for tonight is going to be the following. Change wording around. If you got a blown 400-inch small block making 850 horsepower, would you choose the 871 over the VORTECH? So basically, I'm asking you, which one of those would you pick? Start our poll. So we ended up running both of those, as I said, and that 400 was a good one. It had forged rods, forged pistons, and had an aftermarket block. That particular one was from Speedmaster. We had good heads on it. We ran dart heads on it. We ran trick flow heads on it. We ran a few different camshafts on it. And also when we ran the 871, we ran that combination with a milder camshaft on too. So it wasn't a direct comparison of the 871 versus a VORTECH. I have done that in the past. We've done that a few different times. In fact, I did that exact thing with probably a better blower from the guys at the blower shop who do really good stuff. So we did that on a big block, and we did it with a VORTECH, and the VORTECH ended up making a bit more power because it was, there's just size to do that. The 871 that the blower shop has certainly could make more power. We just basically tried to make it so that the boost pressure was the same. Not always the best equalizer or indicator of power output, obviously, but still, it's an interesting thing. And I think that for the average guy, they might be inclined to do that. Oh, I'm going to run 7 pounds, 10 pounds, 12 pounds, whatever the number is. We're going to do that. Both of them benefited from what could be construed as a form of intercooling. On the 871, we have carburetors feeding the blower, so we got charge cooling from that, from them going through the blower. And on the VORTECH, we had charge cooling in the manifold because we were blowing through a carburetor in that instance, and that worked out very well too. The blow-through stuff works fine, and so does the draw-through stuff, and they would work even better. Both of them would work even better had we run E85 and added that to the mix, put E85 carburetors on the 871 and then the E85 carburetor as a blow-through, and so we could get lots of the super cooling fuel so we could get inter-chilled and make even more power, because we know that the 85 all by itself makes more power. And when you run it on a boosted application like that, it's certainly going to add power all by itself and then allow us to do other things. If we wanted to go up in boost or go up in timing, that would work. So the question up there basically is, which one of those would you pick? Quite honestly, there's not a bad answer here. The better answer is, if you have a naturally aspirated motor, yes, is the answer to, do I want a supercharger? And then which one you pick is, hey, do you want a big 871 sticking out of the hood? Awesome. There's that's not a bad thing. That's just a good thing. Or do you want it tucked under the hood? You can hear a VORTECH usually since it's gear driven, but it doesn't stick out of the hood in the way of view, or it also doesn't allow other people to see it. So that's up to you. Is it more of a sleeper kind of thing? Is it more of a, hey, look the world, I have a supercharger and I'm going to drive around with it like that while it's just sucking all the fuel out of those two big carburetors? And that's nothing but awesome. So the question is, basically, which one of those would you pick? And like I said, it's not like there's a bad answer there. There's just nothing but good there. If you guys have not done it, please go take a look at the video where I ran the two 400s. Again, not technically a direct thing. We could try to get a 400 versus a 400 Ford, and then people could argue about, like we talked about, they could argue about the bore and stroke thing. I had somebody make a comment about, you never want to talk about this like esoteric stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but how are you going to tell me that a Ford, which is a completely different motor, and a Chevy, that any sort of difference between those two is because one of them has a 4-inch bore and the other one has a 4125 bore? How are you going to convince me that that's the thing that made a difference? Particularly in this instance, when we had such other big things that we know make a difference. Like we had a camshaft that had 10 or 12 degrees more duration and 50 or 60 or 80,000 slip. Those are big things. The bore to stroke ratio, how you achieve the displacement is a big thing. If you have 400 inches, we know that that's going to be better than 300 inches. It doesn't matter to me, or it matters less to me, that you got your 400 inches by some combination of bore and some combination of stroke. If you're juggling both of those, if the compression was the same and the displacement the same, I would argue that it's going to be hard for you to measure that difference. And then harder still, or all but impossible, to measure that difference when that's one of 6 things that you changed of the variables that are different between those particular motors. So, and then rod, what's the rod length? I want to talk about rod ratios. I want to talk about dwell time and, and that's all good stuff. And you could go down that rabbit hole and we could talk about it. We could do the math and go, look, this one has whatever degrees more dwell time there. This camshaft works better. We can go into all of that. But those are not big things. Those are little things. And you have to, if we're going to test for that exact variable, then we have to isolate that variable. And then we have to test only for that change and see what that does. Testing for those tiny, all but insignificant variables is more work than testing for a camshaft change or a cylinder head change. It's way more work. And also, in addition to that, in addition to being way more work, you get much less of some sort of gain or loss. Sometimes you can't even see it. You can't even verify it. Like when we did all of the testing, when I did the test with Engine Masters, where we did the piston flip and changed the pin offset. You have to disassemble the whole motor down to nothing and then put it back together to change the pistons. You got to change the pan, all that, take the heads off, got all that stuff. I don't think we had to take the camshaft out. I think we did it with the camshaft in. So we didn't have to take that out. But, the pan, everything, basically heads, carburetor, distributor, all that stuff. And so we have to do all that. And then we showed no horsepower change. And so the greatest amount of work shows the least amount of change. And then when you report that to people, they don't want to hear that anyway. They want to hear that, oh yeah, no, it's something. Well, it's not something. Even when we look on the other side of the decimal point for power, it's not something. If we were to change the cam, it would be something because we did that. If we were to put a carb spacer on there or rockers or change the headers or do things that don't involve disassembling the whole motor, that's why those kinds of things, those kinds of theoretical things, they're good to talk about. And we can talk about that. We can argue back and forth about what a 6-inch rod does with a 5.7 rod. Having tested that on small block Chevys, I know what they did. At least I know what they did when I tested it on the combinations I tested it on. And we can talk about that. And people will argue, especially sharp guys will argue, oh no, it has this. It has this much change in piston speed before and after TDC, and it has this much dwell time difference, and it has this kind of rod angularity difference, and it's not loading into the side. Yes, I know what all the theory does, but when we do that and we actually test it on the dyno, which tells us what it does, at least in terms of power, it doesn't tell us, unless we run it for a really long time, what that does for longevity. But it tells us if there's a power difference. If you're side loading it because of the rod length, like people want to talk about, making it feel like it's kind of a big deal. If you're saying that and you want there to be something there, and then we demonstrate that there's not something there, we don't convince the guy that is certain that there's something there, even with actual results. So that's with a lot of those things, it's not like that. But I digress. The 400-inch Chevy versus the 400-inch Ford, lots of good stuff there. We ran the Ford with nitrous. We ran it with a couple of different cams. We ran the Chevy with a VORTECH, which made over 1,000 horsepower. So we're in these times where it's certainly possible to make that kind of power. Plus, they're 400-inch motors, which is just nothing but good because the only thing better than a 351 or a 383 or a 392 or whatever is a 400 or a 408 or whatever it is. And then a 406. And plus we get to argue about the bore versus stroke stuff, which is all of that's just nothing but good. Let's see what you guys got going on. It's late. You ain't got no job, got nothing to do. You can hear? Okay. Thanks, Winston. I picked the blower. That's a good choice. L83 and a Suburban. Does Brian make a cam kit for it? I only see trucks. Yeah, the cam doesn't care what chassis that's in. The cam just changes the cam. So he has L83 cams and L86 cams and LT1 cams, all those. Effin 57 and the intercooler made power. Ford, Chevy, they're all air pumps. That's right. They don't care. If you can make them the same, they'll be the same. Keep on keeping on. It will depend on the power level. At high horsepower, that loss of torque may actually allow you to have traction. Agreed. And that's part of the thing that we talk about, why we need so much information for guys wanting camshafts or different kinds of blowers or whatever they're picking. Hey, you'll have an overabundance of power and an underabundance of traction. Okay, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. I'm just buying it so that when I nail the throttle, it just lights up the tires. Okay, that's what you want. That's perfect. Okay, we can satisfy that need with this particular combination. And that's better than the guy, oh no, I need it to have, a linear power curve, and I need to storm on the big end, and I want to make 1,000 horsepower on the top, and we need it to mile an hour in ET and all that stuff. Then we got a different thing. 671 all day. Sounds like a typewriter. No idea about either of those. Maybe 5 M90s taped together. Okay. 2 M90s would beat an 871. They won't even be close. Where's the PSI 210 screw blower on the pole? That's the one you want. That would probably be pretty healthy. How much boost can a GM 2.8 liter V6 take before it blows? I want to put an M90 on my Firebird. I think you should go turbo, and you'll be happier. But an M90 there's a definite yes there too. Wild Ant. I don't have a muscle car. I'm a Cadillac with a supercharger sticking out of the hood. You don't want that. You don't want the big blower sticking out of the Cadillac hood. 7 minutes in, you're getting ads. That's right. I got to get paid. This is a used 871 for $600 worth it. Yeah, if it works. I'd have to convert it to a gas engine because it came directly off a diesel. Went 50 minutes before ads this morning. Nice. See, Alan, you did good. 2 M90s would only be like 7 PSI less, I believe, compared to an 871. It wouldn't be boost. It would be flow, and because the boost would depend on what you're putting it on. But 2 M90s, I don't think is going to flow as much as a 871 does. Seems like the VORTECH makes more power usually, but a root style is just so menacing. It is. A roots blower is going to make much more low-speed power than a centrifugal blower does. Because a centrifugal blower, if you have them both make, let's say, 10 pounds, what will happen is the VORTECH, a centrifugal blower, will make 2 or 3 pounds down low, and it'll make 10 pounds at wherever the maximum engine speed is. The 871 will have a slightly rising curve like that, but it'll have like 5 or 6 pounds down low, and so it'll have way more boost down low, and usually more low speed torquage. I looked it up, but couldn't recall exactly. The Ford 351 Windsor has 21 degree heads versus 23 for the small block Chevy. I can't remember if the dart heads were probably 23s. Maybe the trick flows are too. As long as the blower has no gouges in it. But that's pretty standard for Ford stuff. Piston flip is Uncle Tony stuff. Yeah, he's been talking to people about that for a long time. LS is engineered in the 90s, a small block in the 50s. Shocker, that's much better. Yeah, but this wasn't about LSs. This was about Fords. Probably an 871 Jimmy Diesel, just a guess. If you put a hat on that Jimmy, does it have a Jimmy hat? This guy has one 671 and one 871. They're both $350 plus shipping. Let's see. I'm scrolling. I do like the torque curves of both the 400-inch engines. Those extra 50 cubic inches are worth the effort to get it. I agree. If you're doing a 351, if you're rebuilding a motor, like this is what I tell people with small block Chevys too. If you got a 30, you're probably not going to be doing this to a DZ 302, but maybe a 327, certainly a 350. If you're going to rebuilding it and putting new, if you're replacing the crank particularly, but rods and pistons or something, just make a 383. Everything about it will be better. You'll be happier. It'll be torqueier and make good power. I do like the torque curves of both 400 engines. The 2 M90s would weigh about half of what the 871 would weigh. And 871s is pretty hefty. I remember hoisting those up, particularly with carburetors on them, and putting them on the motors on the dyno. It's a lot easier on the dyno than it is to do that in the car. I don't think I've ever done that. Thankfully, I get to choose when I go into work. Nice. Rod ratio really mattered. Pro stock engines wouldn't have 9.2 deck heights with a 500-inch engine. How do we get our vacuum secondaries to work? You change the spring until they open up all the way. 671 might be a small bore or a large bore. I have a small bore 671 that I'm converting. What about that is what is the bore size that you're talking about on the 671? Are those the openings going in and out of the blower? Because the 671 should have the same, they should all have the same rotor packs, right? Would the larger valves in a larger bore configuration make a difference in power production? On what? On what kind of combination, on what kind of bore size? That all depends on what you're trying to do. Sean, what are you talking about? Why are you all fired up? You'll bet that I'm wrong. Bet that I'm wrong about M90s only making 7 pounds. You need to go strip the rotors in the 871 diesel blower, otherwise it wouldn't make much boost. Is the tolerance on those blowers not very tight then for the diesel stuff? As a burnout guy, I'll go the 71 series all the time. They do add a lot of, I mean, it's a big visual statement, but also lots of torque. They do give up a little bit because of the runner length and the manifolds that are kind of inherent in those types of blowers, but the best advice you ever gave me was moving from a 471 to a 671 and nitrous. So did you put a 671 on your 292? Because that's pretty cool. 871 probably weighs less than one big block head. That's a good point. I would have to. I remember the 871 as being fairly heavy though, because the rotors are not. The rotor pack's not light. The casing's not very heavy. But now I don't remember hoisting a big block head up there versus the head wasn't as bad because it wasn't nearly as high. The rotors are different on those. Okay. I don't know that I've seen a small bore and a large bore 671 like side by side. Otto, thank you very much. What are you doing with the 471? I would think a 471 on a 292 might be pretty good. I mean, I did like the one that they showed on the little trophy 4-cylinder. That was pretty cool. You don't have any basis on a race between two M90s and an 871. I thought you were talking about power. You were saying that that would only make 7 pounds, and you think two M90s would make as much power as an 871. I know we've done 1,500 horsepower with an 871, so two M90s are not going to get you there. What if you put an 871 on an 871? There's a guy driving around with 3 of those, but I don't know how much more power you get from those if one is compounding into another one. Diesel blowers are only made to move air. They aren't made to make boost because aren't they evacuating on the diesel stuff? There. I spent time Sunday looking for an upgrade 454 Gen 6 big block with 99cc combustion chamber like stock. Came up with nothing. The ones that I measured, I thought were 102, but that's right there. Can't you just mill a set and get them down to 99? I saw the 871 car cruising on the coast. It's it's stacked up there pretty high. I just don't know. I mean, it looks awesome, and I salute the guy for doing it. I just don't know what that would do from a performance standpoint, other than if you really got in the throttle. I would think that the temperature would be really hot coming out of the last blower. How's our pole doing? If you had a blown 4-inch small block making 850 horsepower, would you choose the 871 over the VORTECH? 52% saying yes. So it's pretty even. You could mill the heads. Intake has to be milled too. But if you're only talking about 2 or 3 cc's, You should be able to get that fairly easily, though, right? 15 or 20, 15 or 20 thousands. From my understanding, all of them except one is an empty case with an idler bearing on. Oh, that's you're talking about the 3 blower thing. That would make sense. I mean, I've seen the faux blowers before on. I saw them mostly back in the day when I was doing stuff with when I was working for All Chevy magazine. We saw that on the T buckets and stuff, where guys would just have a carbureted small block, but they would have the blower sitting on top of it and open the air things, and the pulley would just be spinning, but there's nothing inside there. Feel like performance, I take the VORTECH for the style points, the 871. Yeah, it does make a pretty big statement. Ford versus Chevy video is genius. Should clear up a lot of smoke. I don't know. Usually it creates more problems, although the video is fairly popular, so that's good. Closest match was a set of Mark IV Edelbrocks with 110s. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen aftermarket heads that are that small. I thought that there was an Edelbrock one that was down near 100, but I don't know if that's available anymore. Fake blower with a Pete Jackson gear drive. Yeah, so you can have the noise. Yeah, for me, that's one thing. For me, the gear drive thing, that was never really a consideration. That was never something I would have done. I figured if you're doing the blower, just do the blower, and then that you have that noise. And I don't want that whine if I don't have the power to go with it. But that's just me. Everybody can have their own thing. There. Straight cut gears in the trans. Yeah, and the VORTECH blowers are not quiet either. The gear driven VORTECHs are you definitely hear those. They sound different than a 871 does, but you can definitely hear them. All smaller chamber, big block Chevy, or full races like Big Chiefs and stuff. Yeah, you're talking about really small ones for that, but that's a different thing. That's not your bolt-on kind of cylinder head for that stuff. Just bolt-on stuff. Copy. And we're pasting. People are people. People are people, so let's see. Here we go. No one makes VORTECH 454 Gen 6 aluminum heads. That would be good if they made a replacement version of that was better. But even when I put what do we put on there? Not darts, Rodex heads, I think. I think that's what we put on there. And we did lose compression because the chambers were a lot bigger, but we did pick up power from flow. So if we would have milled those, or VORTECH had a head like that, a race right head or something that had a smaller chamber, it definitely would have been better. The 265 airflow heads with a small chamber would have been my ideal choice for that thing when we were doing it, but the Rodex heads worked good. New to the chat, but 1320 video showed some guys running the Hellcat blower on a Chevy LS platform. Why is that? That's yeah, one of the guys, I don't know who it is, contacted me and asked me if I wanted to test it. And I told him yes. So they've made adapters to run that Hellcat blower on the LS platform. The reason that he's doing that is because the Hellcat blowers are being sold because people are upgrading those blowers for bigger, better blowers. And so they're being sold, and guys want to put them on LSs because there's way more LSs out there than there are Hemis. And so that's why the guy did it. Or the carb inside the empty blower case. Yeah, that's the one that I was talking about. I chose the VORTECH mainly for clearance reasons. Didn't Ford use 1.6 rockers, make the cam bigger than the specs? Do small block Ford come with 1.6 instead? The Ford comes with 1.6 rockers, and then all of their camshafts are calculated using 1.6. They also have in the catalog, if you want to calculate them with 1.7s, you can do that as well. Same thing with Chevys. You can calculate cams with a stock 1.5 ratio or calculate it with a 1.6, which is the upgrade for a Chevy. Stock replacement GM Performance VORTECH 54 Gen 6 Summit lists it's $950 bare each. Wow, that's not cheap. I wonder if I have any of those laying around. My inline 6 has a Ryan Falconer B12 head. That's a good head. The head isn't going to dictate the boost that comes out of the 671. We would need to know what the camshaft is, how fast you're spinning it, what the NA power output is, all that stuff to get an idea. But the nice thing about the blower is that the boost pressure that you're running is adjustable. For that triple stack, what if the two empty cases had giant air-to-water intercoolers in it and the top one was the working one? All of that would be fine. I mean, it would be, it's going to be work for the blower to get it through all that, but it should work fine. I like the look of a roots blower sticking out of the hood. But I went through this decision. I was going to get a 1471 or an F2. Went the F2 and it's all under the hood. Nobody knows until I fire it up. What is the flow rate of the F2? How much power is that thing capable of supporting? Twin torque storms. They do have a twin kit like that, so that works good. So there's plenty of power there. Hellcat Supercharger weighs 149 pounds. Straight cut gears for VWs are awesome. Getaway. What's the test you want to see? I would use a VORTECH on my Corvette, but don't like the blow-off valve leaking air all the time when cruising. Is your Corvette a mass air or is it a speed density? I've seen F2s make over 2,000. Okay. Twin torque storms 106 pounds. Did you weigh them? Do you know how much they weigh, or do they provide that information? F2 is at least 2,000 horsepower. Yeah, most of the blowers. So I don't know about probably ProCharger is the same. VORTECH, I know, underrated all of their stuff. And I'm certain that ProCharger is not giving the ultimate power level rating of that, because all the racers are going to turn them up faster than they want to spin them, than ProCharger wants you to spin them. I choose the 871 because of the cool factor. What's the difference between a Gen 5 LT53 and an LS53? Are any of the parts compatible? You can interchange the heads, but it takes a fair bit of work, and it's not really worth it because the bore center is the same. They provide weight information on Google. Never ask her weight. That's right. You can get a roots blower to fit under the hood of the medium-sized scoop on a truck or something. Corvette C6 mass air. So you could route that air back. It's still got to be on the other side of the MAF though, right? Yeah, it would have to be. But that should help quiet it down though. I most certainly would not turn down either type of blower, but I'd probably do a centrifugal for visibility and power curve that's softer down low. The centrifugal will certainly do that. Steve Morse's last episode, he said the big centrifugal supercharger take 400, 500, 600 horsepower to turn. Blowers take power to turn. But a centrifugal doesn't take as much as a roots blower does, though. Why would you want to fit the roots under the hood? Why would you want to hide that? No, top fuel blowers take 900 horsepower to turn. I would even say that might be conservative. How do you feel running added water or methanol injection for cooling effect for supercharged applications? People do it all the time. I myself think an intercooler is a better way to go, but people do that as well. Have to think about the crankshafts now. That's true. That has to be strong enough to drive that stuff. And really, that PSI, you'll have plenty of horsepower to compete with superchargers mentioned. That said, I'd love to have a roots blower with a Detroit attached in some sort of truck. The Jimmy noise. There. And we're going to get rid of that. We're going to get rid of that. What is that? Yep. I can have a roots blower with the Detroit attached in some sort of truck. Where are we at here? Would you choose the 871 or the VORTECH? 53% saying no. So we got more VORTECH people now. VORTECH coming on strong, charging on the big end like a VORTECH does. Blower, 2 carbs, hot rod. Yep. Make sure the methanol injection droplets are as fine as possible. Same with the water. That it works good. It does help cool things, and if you use methanol, it does help change the detonation characteristics of the motor if all that gets in the combustion chamber. You just want to try to get it in even, and a lot of times that's the difficulty. No wonder I'm hungry. It's 8 o'clock. That's right. It is. It's past dinner time. Top fuel 1471s build 55 pounds of boost, but you need to strip them constantly. Like to do a big block with an 871, but I have no idea what car I'd want to do that with. I like that one Freiberger did with a tunnel ram on it. A blower and a tunnel ram, and they did nitrous and they did E85. So that's like all the pro street stuff. It just needs turbos on it, I guess. Don at DCI Pontiac in Ohio is working with Callie's crankshaft to produce a forged USA Pontiac V8 crankshaft with a big block Chevy crankshaft snout for big boost supercharged. Presently, the only option is a billet at $5,000. So is he trying to B&R? Is he trying to come in under that cost then? Whipple with a VORTECH? Yeah, you could compound that. The guys at VORTECH did that long ago with a Lightning, where they used a VORTECH to blow through the Eaton supercharger that was factory on the Lightning. Is Dulcich back at the farm? I don't know. I haven't talked to Steve in a long time. Car big block Chevy snout on my small block Chevy. I've seen those crankshafts before. And then I've seen the dual keyed stuff too, which is good. Likely be somewhat less money, likely be 2,000 for a Cali's forge. Yeah, a good forged crankshaft is not a cheap deal, but 5,000 is a lot. Rumor has he set up a dyno at the farm. He has a dyno there already. It's running. Tom, the guy that used to work at WestTech, got that up and running for them. I don't know how much testing they're doing there, but they have run motors there. Crower made my billet crank for my inline 6 292 with a big block snout. Nice. So that you could use it to drive a blower. I have an LS7 crankshaft right here, only slightly used. Every magazine test of a big steel 671, 871 roots blower seemed to be diminishing gains with more boost. Is that pretty normal? Yes, the roots blowers are not good at high pressure ratios. They're not good. They're not designed for lots and lots of boost. I know Dan's going to chime in about the top fuel stuff, but that's you could make better boost with other things besides a roots blower. They're not that great at that. And so really high boost levels, they start getting very high charge temperatures. And so that's not great. Have you ever seen fuel distribution in any of the L6ers you've done? I have an AMC 250 with a single plane, and the center seemed to be leaner than the outers. I haven't taken distributions. I would like to do that. I think it would be interesting. But the 292, is that the only inline 6? No, I ran the Atlas there too, but we didn't take individual cylinders. That was a fuel injected motor anyway, so that one should be pretty close. I can't imagine that, like the slant 6 with the intake manifolds that they have and the 292, the intake manifolds that they have, I can't imagine that the distribution should be great, but engineers are pretty good. Even back then, they knew way more than I know, and maybe when they made it, it all worked, but I don't know. I haven't seen a testing on it. Car 4340 crank is good for 3,500 horsepower, according to Crower. Okay. Watching to votes to like ratio isn't mathing. I know. People aren't liking tonight. That's what they cost with ARP fasteners, crank bearings, thrust. Top fuel blowers use high helix angle rotors. I have an Offenhauser 5720 360 single plane intake I ported for my 63 Pontiac Grand Prix 455. Offenhauser AMC intake. I'm getting glowing centers. Is it typical, like the most 6 cylinders, that the center ones are going to be shorter than the outers are? The Alpha 360 intake looks easy to convert into a blower or twin 4-barrel. If it has a blower flange on it, then it shouldn't be too hard to convert it to a blower. I have a build. I'm starting with a 408, 195 heads, 10.5 to 11 to 1, Edelbrock RPM air gap, hydraulic roller power. Going to get custom cam. What should I expect for power? There's no way for me to know without knowing what kind of camshaft you're putting in it. But I just posted a 408 video that has lots of that stuff that would be close to that. Oh, people are people. Offie 360 Pontiac intake works like a modern Edelbrock RPM performer. Ported the Offie. Okay. I mean, doesn't the factory dual plane already work really well for the Pontiac? People are people. That's right. Ralph is what compatible. Ralph, I don't know what your compatibility question is. Centers are definitely shorter than outers. Not sure if I have a way to compensate. The 1-inch 4-hole spacer is way better than the 1-inch open spacer, or something adding a 2-inch 4-hole. Off-the intake Pontiac V8 is cool. Lots of meat present. Tall port to rammer 4 gaskets. The Offie 360 I like is for a Cleveland. Stock Pontiac intake stand tall. Years ago, Whipple had a small book Chevy kit with a 4150 flange on top. Made excellent horsepower torque, but never caught on with hot rodders. Small book Chevy kit. That you would think that would be good. I mean, it's a good blower, though, meaning the Whipple with a carburetor flange on it. I wanted an aluminum intake and test the Offie 5720 myself. It worked good. Cool. I missed my Pontiac. Good engine to work on. Well, why is there all this? What's with all the animosity tonight? What's going on with people? I might own a record. All right, I'm sure. Is this going to be a micro record for owning the best budget SUV? Crazy good deal on a trade. $1,500 into a Yukon with a 6-liter for a BTR stage 3 truck cam, remanufactured 240 heads and rebuilt transmission. Good. So you scored something good. I've got some, I don't know, I asked if he's going to run twin M90s. I've got some very mild sickness that's been oddly making me very angry. Uh-oh. You must have missed him calling. No, I saw that, but I don't know why that's what I mean. I don't know. I don't understand why he's lashing out. Four Windsor is badass. People scorched me in the video comments. Yeah, I don't understand. It's interesting that a lot of people thought it was a 400M for some reason. They're like, "Oh no, those are terrible. Those are awful." Yeah. Twin M90s work for Mike. Looked cool too. No, I'm all for that. I'm all for twin M90s. I just don't understand where the anger comes from. That has nothing to do with twin M90s. I'd like to see a 400M with some CHI heads. Bet that'd not be considered terrible at that point. No, I know. I agree that those are really good heads. The heads that we ran on the 400 were pretty good heads. They were ported by Dr. J's. So they had way more flow than we took advantage of. That motor needed, I think it just needed a lot more compression and probably more camshaft too. Steven, what is your question about a 289 or a 302? He said he wants to hit me. What's going on? That's just knuckleheadedness. 400M with 4V 351 heads. That's what I did. But I did it with aluminum ones, though, which are better than 4V heads. Which do I prefer, a 302 or a 289? To do what with? If I was restoring a 65 or 66 Shelby Mustang, a GT350, then I would do a 289. But a 302 makes more power than the 289, so I would pick that if I was wanting to make power. Have you noticed fueling on root style blowers being a bit asymmetrical compared to normal style intake with the VORTECH? Do you mean having the roots blower favor one or some of the runners because of where it's discharging? Dr. J is still around? Dr. J is not still around. He used to tech on the C4 forum world. Yeah, this was done a long time ago, but he's stopped doing that porting thing, and then was working at a couple of different performance places. He was at CP, maybe went over to JE or something. I haven't talked to Bryce for a while. Yeah, I just didn't know if you had a favorite. I don't have a favorite. Either one of those are fine. The bigger motor usually ends up making more power. So if that's what you're trying to do, that's fine. Okay, Sean, guess what? You're gone. You need to like you need to go somewhere. I'm thinking 10 minutes. You need to go relax somewhere. I don't know what your deal is tonight, but you just go have a drink, go relax, go chill. You need to not be part of this. Different ports being favored over there for creating fuel from the top issue. I don't know. I don't remember ever taking. I'd have to look back and see. Maybe WestTech has done that. Maybe they've done 802s. Maybe they did that with Freiberger's motor, where they did 802s. I think that the openings for the 671 and 871 stuff, I think that opening tends to be more generous and a little more even for all of the runners. Some of them are small openings, like for the M90 stuff that people have been talking about for some reason. But all those factory ones are port injected, so they're just delivering air. Steven, happy to help, man. I can get the 351 4V heads flow 340. Not the best, but no, that's enough to make a ton of motor, or make enough to make a ton of power. But who wants to port iron heads? How did the M90s hurt him? I don't know. He jumped on me too when I told him that two M90s weren't going to make as much power as an 871. I don't know what the deal was. So 351 Cleveland has a 9.3 degree valve inclination angle before the cant factor. Okay. Speed Talk still has good archives. 300 inline 6 guys want to port iron heads that aren't even cross flow. Okay, well, they don't, but they have to. I know. Then they got to put the little lump port things in there, and they're like Siamese ports too. 871 is a big blower, particularly an 871 that's stripped and like I said, the blower shop stuff does good work. And Freiberger, they made a ton of power on theirs. Maybe he was hacked. Yeah, that's all possible. I got smoked by a Z28 in the Civic today on the highway. On the little corners on the Stagecoach, I got him. Yeah, I saw a post on something, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, that somebody was talking about somebody from, and I don't know if it actually happened, but somebody from a V8 crowd, a Camaro crowd, said that the Honda guys posted this, and they were talking about back in the day, 145 horsepower V8 in a Camaro, and how the Hondas would beat up on it and stuff. I'm like, and then their example was an S2000, which I'm like, yeah, that's a really good motor. That's a 250 horsepower 4-cylinder. That's a pretty fast car. But I don't know what V8 was making 140 horsepower. It had to be a base one. Does anyone make a hit for 300? 4 liters and 258s have the Edelbrock head available. Flow is supposedly in the 250s. 250 would be enough to support a lot of power. 351 4V heads take a lot of epoxy to fill the ports correctly. They're already too big. Yep. 871 on a big block with a huge cam. Or like if it's in reverse, the tires spin between lobes. 871 rotors, 15 inches. 671 is 15-inch rotors. 15.9 for the 871. 10-inch rotors for the 471. Oh, cool. When are you going to do another Holly tune video? I haven't ever done a tune video that I remember, other than telling you what happens when you don't run the right timing, like 15 degrees or 17 or 19 or whatever there. There's a hole in the market for iron heads being ported. Do I need to start porting with my Harbor Freight tools? Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Allied's an S2000. I don't know what the weight is. But if the information that they were putting there, the 0 to 60 time was 6.8, I think. And I think that for the Camaros that they were talking about, it was, I don't know, 8s or 9s or something. 2,800 pounds for the S2000. Yeah, that's going to be lighter than I think the IROC is the one that they were talking about. But again, it's just people arguing about stuff. Just found a guy who has in Wisconsin, has a screaming deal on a Cobalt SS Supercharger and intake manifold, $150. Long time ago, Steve B did a Holly video, but Steve was not talking much. He would be the guy that we want to talk. I know this is about blowers. No, this is question and answer time, so whatever you want. And by the way, our poll is 50-50 right now. I know this is about blowers, but I'd still love to see a super low budget L96 rec port truck intake, 2 GT45s, maybe an LS9 cam. So I don't, why would you want that? It's just going to make what the 2 GT45s could make. The GT45s could do 1,500 if we turned them up enough. That's not a very good cam for that, but it should get us somewhere. Mid-80s Camaros were 135. Porting iron heads is hard on the tools and on your body, and your hemoglobin count. It's just all bad all the way around. Just bought 2 464s for $600. Nice. Didn't think my Vibe GT is lighter than an S2000. 1982, the CVCC made 14 wheel horsepower. I like those CVCC Hondas. I would like an even earlier one than that, though. I want a like mid to late 70s one. The really small one. Got 1 more minute. If you had a blown 4-inch small block making 850 horsepower, would you choose the 871 over the VORTECH? 50-50. We're going to stop right there. It's a 2 to 6 month waiting period, B&R, for those. That seems like a lot. Counting down the seconds. Hopefully, Sean has had a beverage. Yeah, you don't want to rust your lungs. That's not good. We downed a bunch of S2000s. Yeah, they would do 200 at the tire. They were pretty stout. I remember the West Tech guys had one, and they did a bunch of stuff for it's for Car and Driver. They took one out to Bonneville, and so Tom did a bunch of stuff to it. I think he got it up to 250 at the tire, and it did well. Yes, it's the one percenters. Those are always bad. And I will see you guys all tomorrow.